Let's start with the first thing of the heart, which is the pericardium. Now, what is pericardium? Comprises of a fibrous and a serous layer enclosing the heart, pulsating from womb to tomb, vital organ pumping blood to the entire body, right? The pulsations of which are governed by the brain through the various nerves. And since the heartbeat is felt against the chest wall, it appears to be more active than the quiet brain controlling it. Meditation, yoga, and exercise are helping in regulating the heartbeat through the brain. Now, layers of the heart wall, as you can see, we have the pericardium. The pericardium has an outer fibrous layer, after which it has a serous pericardium, which contains two layers, the parietal one and the serous one. The serous layer is in relation, intimately connected to the epicardium, and then we have the myocardium and the endocardium, right? So if you see, it is the serous layer of the pericardium. The parietal layer, outermost layer, consists of dense fibrous tissue, areolar tissue, and the mesothelium, whereas the visceral layer contains the mesothelium and the areolar tissue. Between them, we have the pericardial cavity containing the pericardial fluid, after which we have the heart wall consisting of the myocardium, this is the outermost epicardium, and innermost endocardium. Outside the serous pericardium is the fibrous pericardium. Here. Now, pericardium is a fibroserous sac, with a sac enclosing the heart and the roots of the great vessels, situated in the middle mediastinum, consisting of the fibrous pericardium and the serous pericardium. Now, the fibrous pericardium, as you can see, this wrist corresponds to the base of the heart, which is invaginating inside the balloon, forming the inner layer corresponding to the visceral layer of serous pericardium, and outer layer corresponding to the parietal layer, the space in the middle, which is called the corresponding to the pericardial cavity. The fibrous pericardium encloses the heart and fuses with the vessels which enter or leave the heart, and the heart is situated within the fibrous and the serous pericardial sac. As the heart develops, it invaginates itself into the serous sac without causing any breach in its continuity. The last part to enter is the region of the atria, from where the visceral pericardium is reflected as the parietal pericardium. You can see they are reflecting from here. Thus, the parietal layer of the serous pericardium gets adherent to the inner surface of the fibrous pericardium, while the visceral layer of serous pericardium gets adherent to the outer layer of the heart and forms its epicardium. Okay, so you can see the outermost is the fibrous pericardium, then we have the serous pericardium. The serous pericardium has an outer parietal layer adherent to the fibrous pericardium and an inner visceral layer adherent to the epicardium of the heart. And you can see the fibrous pericardium is a conical sac made up of fibrous tissue. The parietal layer of serous pericardium is attached to its deep surface. So the features of fibrous pericardium are: the apex is blunt, lies at the level of the sternal angle, fusing with the roots of the great vessels and with the pretracheal fascia. The base is broad and inseparably blended with the central tendon of the diaphragm. Anteriorly, it is connected to the upper and lower ends of the body of the sternum by weak superior and inferior sternopericardial ligaments. Posteriorly related to the principal bronchi, esophagus, basically the structures of the posterior mediastinum. Here, on each side, the pericardium is related to the mediastinal pleura, mediastinal surface of the lung, the phrenic nerve, and the pericardophrenic vessels. It protects the heart against sudden overfilling and prevents the overexpansion of the heart. Now, the serous pericardium, it is thin, double-layered serous membrane lined by mesothelium. Outer layer or the parietal layer fused with the fibrous pericardium. inner or the visceral pericardium or epicardium fused or epicardium is fused to the heart except along the cardiac grooves where it is separated from the heart by the blood vessels. The two layers are continuous with each other at the roots of the great vessels, that is the ascending aorta. This is the ascending aorta, pulmonary trunk, the two vena cava, and the four pulmonary veins. The pericardial cavity is a potential space between the parietal pericardium and the visceral pericardium, containing only a thin film of serous fluid, which lubricates the opposed surfaces and allows the heart to beat smoothly. Now, sinuses of the pericardium. The epicardium at the roots of the great vessel is arranged in form of two tubes. It's the arterial tube enclosing the ascending aorta and the pulmonary trunk at the arterial end of the heart tube. And then we have a venous tube enclosing the vena cava and the pulmonary veins at the venous end of the heart tube. Now, the passage between these two tubes is called the transverse sinus of the pericardium. Right? And during development, to begin with, the veins of the heart were crowded together, after which increase in heart size causes the veins to separate out, and a pericardial reflection surrounds all of them, and it is forming the oblique pericardial sinus, and this cul-de-sac is posterior to the left atrium. This is the oblique sinus over here. The transverse sinus is a horizontal gap between the arterial end, this is the venous end, so the transverse sinus should be over here, bounded anteriorly by the ascending aorta and the pulmonary trunk, and posteriorly by the superior vena cava, inferiorly by the left atrium, and on either side opening into the general pericardial cavity. It develops from degeneration of the central part of the dorsal mesocardium. The oblique sinus is a narrow gap behind the heart. Oblique sinus over it is bounded anteriorly by the left atrium, posteriorly by the parietal pericardium and the esophagus. On the right and the left side bounded by reflections of the pericardium. Below and to the left opens up into the rest of the pericardial cavity. Oblique sinus permits pulsations of the left atrium to take place freely and develops due to rearrangement of the veins at the venous end. Contents of the pericardium: heart with cardiac vessels and nerves, the ascending aorta, pulmonary trunk, lower half of superior vena cava, terminal part of the inferior vena cava, and terminal part of the pulmonary veins. Blood supply. The pericardium is supplied by the internal thoracic arteries, the musculophrenic artery descending thoracic aorta, and the veins drain into the corresponding veins. Nerve supply. The fibrous and parietal pericardia are supplied by the phrenic nerve, therefore they are sensitive to pain. The epicardium is supplied by the autonomic nerves of the heart and is insensitive to pain. So pain of pericarditis originates in the parietal pericardium alone. On the other hand, the cardiac pain or angina originates in the cardiac muscle or in the vessels of the heart. Now, fibrous pericardium develops from the septum transversum. Okay. So, a collection of fluid in the pericardial cavity is referred to as a pericardial effusion or the cardiac tamponade. Okay, so this fluid is going to compress the heart and restrict the venous filling during diastole. It also reduces the cardiac output. Pericardial effusion can be drained by puncturing in the left fifth or the sixth intercostal space, just lateral to the sternum or in the angle between the xiphoid process and the costal margin, with the needle directed upward, backward, and to the left, as you can see in this picture. Okay, by puncturing the left fifth or sixth intercostal space lateral to the sternum or in the angle between the xiphoid process and the left costal margin, with the needle directed upward, backward, and to the left. Mind you, it is not a blind procedure, it is always ultrasound guided. Right, so you can see. Okay, so in mitral stenosis, this left atrium enlarges and compresses the esophagus, causing dysphagia, and during heart surgery, the ligature can be passed with the transverse sinus around the aorta and the pulmonary trunk.